Yo, we're back again, and this is the second part of my series breaking down a hip hop track in the Maschine MK3. For this track I sampled Gladys Knight and the Pips, The Making of You, and a few other artists have already attempted this before. Pete Rock and 50 Cent, and I think Ninth Wonder has also got a really good version he does with Sky Zoo.
Yeah. Hey yo, Ninth, they got a long way to go, homie. I mean, I hear them talking, but you know, it's like the sample says, you know, they got a long way to go, because when they talk, it's like I gotta lean to the side just to listen to them, because they talking out the side of their mouth. I'm gonna put them on the SK special.
Cool, so let's just jump into the sample chopping. Whenever I have a sample, I'm really thinking about two core techniques. The first one involves chopping the sample at all the beats or on the pulse of the sample. And to do this in Maschine, you hit sampling and then I come to slice mode, and what I will almost always do is hit the arrow to come over so I can see the start and end points of the slice. And then what we do here is we just try and time and listen to the song and then add slices as we're listening to the beat.
Big expression of happiness, boy, you could miss with a dozen roses. Such would astound you, the joy of children laughing.
So I've done a whole bunch of chops. I've done 49 slices. And I can say right from the get-go that the reason this technique is so useful is you can have so many slices to pick from and little chunks of the song. What I would generally do here is apply this to a sound, because if I apply this to a group, it will apply only the first 16 chops, because that's the most pads you can have in a group. So if I apply this to a sound, and then I come to keyboard and I go all the way down to C-2, I can start to play the chops up and down the chromatic scale here. A couple of settings you want to turn on. One I would almost always turn on is just putting polyphony on 1, and that means whenever I hit two samples after each other, they're going to cut each other off because I'm only letting one voice or one note play at a time. The next thing to consider is if you want to use one-shot mode or ADSR mode. Now, the thing about one-shot mode is it's really fun to play with because all the slices will just trigger to the end of the chops, but you maybe have slightly less control in certain aspects. When you compare it to ADSR mode, so in ADSR mode, if I just turn the sustain down, one thing that I can do is make really snappy chops, or I can use the release to fade down the chops, and if you have a high release it's going to work a little bit like one-shot mode, but rather than having the sample at full volume the whole time, it's going to start to decay the sample down. Even though you've just tapped it a little bit, it has that little fade away, and that can sort of help with the smoothness sometimes of the samples. As some of them start to fade right at the end. Cool, so now we can start to play around with our chops a little bit and just get a feel for them. And I really like to have a basic drum groove going when I'm doing my sample chopping, as it just really helps me start to fit everything to the beat. And I sometimes really struggle to not have a drum beat going behind and just use a metronome. So I've got the drum beat we made in the last tutorial still running. And I'm just going to start to jam out with these chops a little bit and see what I can come up with. So this technique is really cool and it can work amazingly for some tracks, but there's sort of one downside to this technique, and that's that, you know, if I have 150 slices, it's going to be really hard for me to jump from slices at the end and to mix them with slices at the beginning, and it can get really complicated messing with loads and loads of slices like that. And really, I think kind of a cool way to advance this technique is that you really want to pick, say, your 16 best slices from the whole track and then to put them into one new instrument. And we can actually do this in Maschine with this sort of little trick. Okay, so what we can do now is trigger the slices that we want. And I remember I found those slices that I was really liking playing with. We're sounding really cool. So what I can do with these chops is if I just trigger the chop, you can see I've zoomed in here on this slicing screen. And it's going to jump my screen to wherever the chop is, and so now I can see this slice and I can just click and drag this to a new sound. Now you can see it's just copied the whole instrument there, but if I actually just click on edit, if that's the first thing I click and then I go to truncate and then I hit apply, I now just have this one chop and I can now play that chromatically up and down the scale, but I've essentially just taken that one chop out of this whole sample now. So now we're back in this group again. Let's go back to slicing. Take this chop as well, and let's go and get a couple more. Oh, wait, I've got to go back to this first instrument. Let's take that one. So on this, I can go back. Remember, the technique is just go to edit, truncate, and then I'm going to go to this new sound, truncate that one. And if I just show you now these three new ones. But also, you know, if I had slices now, if I go back into this slicing mode and I go to like the next page, these are cool, these four here. So maybe I want to take these, maybe this one here. So I can take this one out, come back to my instrument, drag that one out. Drag that one out. Now I have these I can go through and we can truncate these ones. That's been applied. So now, if I go to the pads again, I have and in this way, you know, if I had sliced that up into loads of slices, I could be piecing together loads of different sections of the track into this kind of ultimate sliced up 16 pad instrument. Now, the other technique, which is actually the one I used in this track, is a lot more similar to the way you will see people sampling on their MPCs and sampling from vinyls. And when you watch videos on YouTube of them, you know, artists like Ninth Wonder making beats, you will often see them spinning back the vinyl and then like kind of recording on their MPC and playing a little clip of the sample, recording that little section, wheeling it somewhere else, and then recording another little bit for another pad. Okay, so to get going with this technique, the first thing we've got to do is make sure we have the whole sample selected. And then another thing I like to do is have polyphony on 1. And also I like to put the choke group on as well. So I've put it on a choke group, and that's going to mean whenever we duplicate the pad, all the settings are going to be embedded in there. And then one other thing is I like to turn on ADSR and then just have a long release. And this is because when you have it on one-shot mode, you'll always get this sample ringing out. And I know you can choke it in Maschine, but it drives me a little bit mad whenever I trigger it, just having this long sample ringing the whole time. So I quite like just having some release on there. Even if I take that off later, that seems to just make it a bit more bearable for me to do this process. Anyway, so the whole idea with this is you use your ears, hopefully more than your eyes, and you just look through and look for notes, like sonically just hear sounds that you might like, and you begin to piece them together one by one. And so you take your first pad, duplicate it across, and I'm just finding a new sound there. And I'm going to keep going and duplicating and still moving across. Let's go into the pattern a little bit more. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can be a bit more accurate. That's kind of cool. So I'm just listening for things here. Let's duplicate this again. I think I've got a little bit like not enough release on, so let's just go and put up like to 5 seconds. What I'm also doing, you might be able to see, is I'm always referencing my previous pads as I'm moving forwards, and you're really trying to build like a cohesive set of colors or like a palette of sounds which are all going to work together. And it's really important to keep referencing all the other sounds as you're doing this, and just make sure the new things you're going to add are going to work with what you already have there. You can hear these 2 chops I took in the beginning are kind of not working with everything else I have here. So I might actually delete them as I go. But let's keep filling these out.
"12 seconds later."
Now that you have a whole palette of sounds, you can just start to jam out to a beat and see what you can come up with. Of course, I'm liking what I have, but I have a couple of chops here that I'm just not really feeling. Like these chops up here are sounding really cool, and these are sounding cool, but these, maybe that was nice. These 3 are not really working, but I really want some more options to mess with something that sounds similar to these 3 pads. So I want those extra notes, so I'm going to take these, and don't be afraid to just kind of mess up. Cool, so I'm just trying to figure some words and to make things make sense, and I found these little chops here where I can go. So I've got the initial